Most ancient cultures prefer their origin stories immaculate. When scribes sat down to record the dawn of their civilizations, they usually etched tales of flawless, invincible demigods who conquered nature and crushed their enemies without breaking a sweat. Take Rome. Their foundational lore features Romulus and Remus. These are the legendary twin brothers credited with founding the city in Roman mythology, supposedly sired by the god of war and nursed by a wild wolf before building an empire from the dirt. Or look at ancient Mesopotamia, which gave us Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is the mythological Sumerian king featured in one of the world's oldest epic poems, and his surviving statues depict an impossibly muscular hero casually holding a fully grown lion in the crook of his arm. That establishes a very specific baseline for how a patriarchal hero is supposed to act. So, when we turn to the figure of Abram, a man revered today by over 4 billion people across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, you naturally expect his debut to be equally triumphant. Instead, the 12th chapter of Genesis gives us an incredibly jarring introduction. Over the span of just 20 short verses, Abram swings wildly from demonstrating absolute, unshakable trust in a divine voice to abandoning his own wife out of sheer, panicked self-preservation. Curious, why would the authors of a sacred text construct their grand origin story this way? To understand the ancient scribes' motive, we have to look at why they chose to broadcast their founding fathers' most cowardly moment right from the start. At the beginning of the chapter, Abram is 75 years old and living comfortably in Haran. Haran was a major wealthy commercial city located in what is now modern-day Turkey. He has accumulated livestock, servants, and a deeply rooted life. This map of the ancient Near East shows the staggering distance he was asked to cross. A divine voice tells Abram to pack up and leave his country, his kindred, and his father's house to travel toward Canaan. Canaan was an ancient region situated between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, but to Abram it was an entirely undefined frontier. Without a single word of protest recorded in the text, he obeys. He gathers his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his possessions, and simply marches south into the desert void. He eventually crosses into the land, stopping at Sikkim and then Bethel. Sikkim and Bethel were ancient Canaanite cities that would later become major religious sanctuaries. At both stops, Abram pitches his tent and builds stone altars, publicly declaring his devotion to the God who guided him there. By verse 9, the narrative has perfectly positioned Abram as the ultimate paragon of virtue. He gave up his wealth, risked his family, and traversed the ancient world purely on faith, looking exactly like the unshakable icon you build a religion around. Then, reality violently interrupts. A severe famine strikes the land, drying up the pastures and threatening Abram's entire caravan with starvation, causing the absolute faith he demonstrated to evaporate and be replaced by raw human survival instinct. To escape the drought, Abram abandons his newly promised land and heads down into Egypt. Egypt was the agricultural and military superpower of the ancient Near East, fed continuously by the massive Nile River. For a nomadic herdsman, crossing their border meant walking into an intimidating, hyper-advanced imperial state. Right before they cross the border, Abram does the math on his situation. He realizes that his wife, Sarai, is highly attractive, and he deduces that the local Egyptian authorities will likely murder him just to take her. So he formulates a plan. He asks Sarai to lie and tell the Egyptians she is his sister, explicitly stating his reasoning, so that his own life will be spared for her sake. He trades his wife's bodily autonomy for his own personal safety. The plan backfires catastrophically. The princes of Pharaoh, the monarch of ancient Egypt, see Sarai, commend her beauty, and immediately confiscate her for the royal household. In return, the king pays Abram a bride price, showering the patriarch with sheep, oxen, donkeys, camels, and servants, while his wife sits trapped in a foreign palace. Abram does nothing to rescue her, and the situation requires a literal act of God. Plagues strike the Egyptian court, prompting Pharaoh to investigate the source of the affliction and uncover Abram's lie. The chapter ends with a furious Pharaoh summoning Abram, demanding to know why he lied, and promptly deporting him under armed guard. Abram leaves Egypt completely intact, keeping the wealth he acquired, but entirely stripped of his dignity. As he marches back into the desert, Abram's survival has nothing to do with his own heroism or strategic brilliance. He escapes the mess he created solely because a higher power intervened to stop a foreign king from making a mistake. Which brings us back to the scribes. If you are trying to convince the ancient world that your lineage is chosen and blessed, why do you painstakingly record the moment your founder sold out his wife for some livestock? They kept it because Genesis 12 actively rejects the mythological standard of the surrounding empires. Instead of presenting an untouchable demigod like Gilgamesh or Romulus, the text introduces a remarkably fragile, complicated human being. The great nation promised in verse 2 is built by people who panic, lie, and fail under pressure. We see a solitary traveler walking through a harsh desert, navigating literal famines alongside his own immense moral shortcomings. By stripping Abram of any illusion of perfection, the text argues that divine plans do not require flawless instruments. The narrative demonstrates that extreme spiritual devotion and profound personal cowardice can exist inside the exact same person. That duality makes the opening of Abram's story enduring. It refuses to sanitize history, offering an origin story that accurately mirrors the erratic, deeply flawed reality of the human condition. The authors trusted that the truth of a fearful man is infinitely more compelling than the myth of a perfect one.